The small cafe on Maple Street was always noisy in the morning. The smell of coffee, the rush of footsteps, and the endless sound of orders filled the air. In one corner stood three young women, triplets, working silently behind the counter. They looked almost identical, with the same dark curly hair tied neatly, tired brown eyes, and matching aprons that had begun to fade from constant washing. Their names were Lila, Lisa, and Lana. They had moved to the United States 2 years ago in search of a better life. But instead of finding comfort, they found a manager who treated them like they were nothing. That morning, a small mistake changed everything. A cup of hot coffee slipped from Lila's trembling hands and spilled across the tiled floor. The cafe went silent. The manager, a tall man with a sharp face named Mr. Collins, stormed over in fury. His voice boomed, drawing everyone's attention. He ordered the girls to kneel and clean up the mess immediately. But what broke them wasn't his words. It was the humiliation in his tone. He laughed and mocked them in front of customers, calling them useless and telling them to clean faster as if they were beneath him. In the far corner, a man sat quietly watching. He wore a dark suit, his presence calm yet commanding. His name was Ethan Brooks, a billionaire investor who rarely showed emotion. But as he watched the three girls shaking, trying to hold back tears, something inside him stirred. He had seen greed, arrogance, and cruelty before, but not like this. That morning, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He wouldn't leave that cafe without doing something about what he just witnessed. Ethan Brooks rose slowly from his chair, his dark suit blending with the polished tones of the cafe. The chatter had died completely, replaced by an uneasy silence. Every eye followed him as he walked toward the counter where the triplets knelt, still wiping the floor with trembling hands. Their cheeks glistened with tears they tried to hide, afraid that showing pain would only make things worse. Mr. Collins crossed his arms, unaware that the stranger approaching wasn't just another customer. Ethan stopped beside them and spoke calmly, his voice steady but cold enough to slice through the tension. "That's enough," he said. His tone made the room freeze. Mr. Collins tried to defend himself, claiming the girls were careless and disrespectful employees. But Ethan's eyes didn't move from the triplets. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a business card, and placed it on the counter. "From today," he said quietly, "they no longer work for you." He then turned to the triplets and said, "You're coming with me." The room gasped. Mr. Collins laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but Ethan simply pulled out his phone and called his assistant. Within minutes, two men in suits entered the cafe and stood behind him. Their presence alone made the manager step back. Ethan handed the triplets clean napkins to wipe their faces, then left without another word. As the door closed behind them, Lila clutched the napkin tightly. She couldn't understand what just happened. The man had looked at them like they were human, something they hadn't felt in a long time. And for the first time since coming to America, hope flickered faintly in their hearts. The triplets sat quietly in the back of a sleek black car that glided through the city streets. None of them spoke. The leather seats felt too soft beneath them, and the silence felt heavier than the morning air. Lila, sitting by the window, watched the buildings rush by and wondered if this was some kind of dream. Lisa, the most outspoken of the three, kept stealing glances at Ethan in the front seat. Lana, the youngest by a few minutes, held both their hands tightly as if afraid they'd disappear. Ethan didn't say much. His phone buzzed several times, but he ignored it. When his driver finally stopped before a tall glass building in downtown Toronto, he turned to the triplets and said, "Come with me." They obeyed silently, their hearts pounding. Inside, the lobby shimmered with gold accents and marble floors. People greeted Ethan respectfully, calling him sir, while the triplets trailed behind, looking out of place in their old aprons and worn shoes. He led them into a private elevator that opened into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows. The city skyline stretched endlessly before them. Ethan turned around and looked at the three young women who stood nervously by the door. "You shouldn't have been treated like that," he said quietly. "I own the chain that cafe belongs to, and starting today, that manager is gone." Leela's eyes widened. They couldn't believe a man like him would care about people like them. Lisa started to cry softly, and Lana held her close. Ethan handed them each a bottle of water, his gaze softening. "You're safe now," he said. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of something far greater than any of them could imagine. The next morning felt unreal to the triplets. They woke up not in their small shared apartment, but in a guest suite at the top of Ethan's building. The beds were soft, the sheets smelled of lavender, and sunlight spilled gently across the wide windows. For the first time in years, they didn't wake to the sound of alarm clocks or the weight of unpaid rent. Leela sat up slowly, brushing her hair back, still wondering if all this was truly happening. Lisa walked to the window, gazing down at the busy city, her heart trembling with a strange mix of fear and gratitude. Lana, always the quiet one, smiled faintly. A gentle knock came on the door, and Ethan's assistant, Miss Grace, stepped in carrying a tray of breakfast, pancakes, fresh fruit, and steaming coffee. She spoke kindly, saying Mr. Brooks wanted to see them once they were ready. The triplets exchanged nervous glances. What did he really want from them? Why would a billionaire help strangers like them? Still, they cleaned up, dressed in the simple new clothes Grace had provided, and followed her to Ethan's office. When they entered, Ethan was standing by the window, reading a document. He turned with a calm smile and gestured for them to sit. "I'm not doing this for pay," he said softly. "I believe people deserve a fair chance. I want to offer you positions in one of my foundations. You'll receive training, housing, and fair pay. But most importantly, I want you to rebuild your confidence." Tears welled in their eyes. No one had ever spoken to them like that before, with respect. As they nodded, Ethan knew he had made the right choice. Yet deep down, he also sensed that this decision would change his life in ways he hadn't expected. The triplets began their first day at the Brooks Empowerment Foundation, a nonprofit organization Ethan had built to help immigrants and underprivileged youth find stable work and education. The glass building buzzed with life. Young professionals carrying files, volunteers greeting visitors, and laughter echoing from the training halls. Leela, Lisa, and Lana stood side by side, wearing modest office clothes Grace had provided. Their hands trembled slightly, but their hearts felt light for the first time in a long while. Grace walked them through the foundation's departments, explaining their roles. Lila would assist in data organization, Lisa would help manage event schedules, and Lana would handle communications. It was nothing like the cafe. They were treated with kindness and respect. Coworkers smiled and showed them around, unaware of the humiliation they had faced days earlier. During lunch, they sat together at the outdoor terrace, staring at the skyline. For once, they felt seen, not as poor immigrant girls, but as people who mattered. Later that afternoon, Ethan visited the office unexpectedly. His presence immediately shifted the atmosphere, but he wasn't there for business. He simply wanted to check on them. "Are you settling in well?" he asked. They nodded eagerly, trying to hide their tears. Lila spoke up softly, saying, "We don't know how to thank you." Ethan shook his head. "Sometimes helping others helps us more than we realize," he said, before walking away. That night, back in their suite, the triplets couldn't stop talking about him. He wasn't just wealthy, he seemed lonely, as if his kindness came from a place of pain. They didn't know it yet, but behind Ethan's calm smile was a man haunted by loss, and saving them had awakened memories he had long buried. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights flickering across the glass walls like restless stars. He poured himself a glass of water and stared out at the skyline. The faces of the triplets kept flashing through his mind, their trembling hands, their quiet gratitude. It reminded him of someone he had once loved deeply, someone who had faced the same kind of cruelty.
Her name was Clara, and she had been everything to him until a tragic accident took her away 3 years earlier. Since then, Ethan had buried himself in work, pretending success could fill the hole she left behind. But seeing the triplets suffering had stirred something human inside him again, something he thought was gone. At the foundation, the triplets had no idea what memories their presence had awakened. They spent the evening preparing for a presentation Grace assigned them, eager to prove themselves. Lila practiced speaking confidently, Lisa organized the files, and Lana created slides on her laptop. Their teamwork was seamless. They moved like three parts of one soul. But when Grace came in to check on them, she noticed how tired they looked and gently said, "You don't have to prove anything today. You've already come so far." Later, when the triplets returned to their suite, they found a note slipped under their door. It was written in neat handwriting. "Dinner tomorrow at 7 p.m., Ethan." Their hearts raced. Why would he invite them? What could he possibly want to discuss? They sat together wondering if their lives were truly changing, or if fate was simply preparing them for another test of the heart. The following evening arrived faster than the triplets expected. They dressed simply but beautifully, each choosing a soft-colored dress Grace had picked out for them earlier that day. Lila wore light blue, Lisa chose pale pink, and Lana went with soft white. They looked at themselves in the mirror, hardly recognizing the tired girls from the cafe. Nervous laughter filled the room as they tried to calm each other before heading to the dining floor of the Brooks
When they
Tower.
arrived, the private restaurant glowed warmly with candles and soft music. Ethan stood when he saw them, his usual stern face softening into a faint smile. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly as he gestured for them to sit. The dinner wasn't extravagant, grilled salmon, vegetables, and juice, but it felt like a royal meal to the triplets. They spoke little at first, too shy to begin. But Ethan broke the silence, asking about their dreams and what they had hoped for when they came to America. Leela spoke first, saying she wanted to study nursing. Lisa said she dreamed of running her own cafe one day, one that treated workers with kindness. Lana smiled shyly and said she only wanted peace. Ethan listened closely, nodding thoughtfully at every word. He didn't make promises or offer money, he simply told them something that would stay with them forever. Dreams don't die because of hardship, they only sleep until someone believes in them again. By the time dinner ended, laughter filled the room. For the first time, Ethan felt warmth returning to his heart. And for the triplets, that evening marked the beginning of something they couldn't yet name, a bond deeper than gratitude, built on empathy and unseen pain. The next day, news of Ethan's act spread quietly through his company. Employees whispered about how he had rescued 3 immigrant sisters from humiliation. Some admired him, others questioned his motives. But Ethan ignored the talk. He had always lived under scrutiny, and kindness was the one thing he refused to explain. Meanwhile, the triplets settled deeper into their new routine at the foundation. They arrived early, worked hard, and smiled at everyone they met. Their laughter began to brighten the office halls, and for many employees, their presence felt like a fresh breeze in a place that had grown too serious. One afternoon, while the triplets were arranging supplies in the storage room, Ethan walked in unexpectedly. He noticed how coordinated they were. Leela giving directions, Lisa checking inventory, and Lana quietly noting every detail. When they noticed him, they froze, nervous but smiling. "You've turned this place around in just a week," he said gently. Lisa laughed softly, saying, "Maybe it just needed a woman's touch." Ethan chuckled for the first time in months, surprising even himself. Later that day, Grace approached Ethan privately. "Sir," she said, "they truly admire you. But remember, they're still healing." Ethan nodded slowly. He knew she was right. His help had lifted them from humiliation, but scars like theirs didn't vanish overnight. That night, he stood by his window again, watching the rain fall over the city. For a long time, he thought of Clara, then of the triplets' laughter echoing in his memory. For the first time since losing Clara, the silence in his heart didn't feel so heavy. Something was changing, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for it.
A week later, dark clouds gathered over the city, and so did the tension at the foundation. A few senior employees had begun murmuring behind closed doors, accusing the triplets of using sympathy to gain Ethan's favor. Some even claimed they were taking advantage of his generosity to climb higher. The whispers grew louder each day, reaching Grace's ears before they finally reached Ethan's. She tried to shield the triplets from it, but rumors had a way of spreading like wildfire. That morning, when Leela entered the office, she noticed how differently people looked at them. The friendly smiles were gone. Lisa tried to laugh it off, saying, "People will always talk." But Lana could feel the heaviness behind those words. By noon, one of the staff members confronted them, accusing them of favoritism. The triplets were humiliated again, their voices breaking as they tried to explain that they had never asked for anything special. Ethan, who had arrived at the building unexpectedly, overheard the entire scene.
He stepped in immediately, his calm voice commanding silence. "Enough," he said. His tone carried disappointment more than anger. "These women earned their place here. I won't allow envy to poison what we're building." His words silenced everyone, but the damage had already been done. The triplets were quiet for the rest of the day, shaken by how quickly kindness could turn to resentment. That night, Ethan sent them a message asking them to meet him at the rooftop garden. Under the city lights, he told them softly, "I can't control what people think, but I can promise you this, you'll never face this world alone again." The wind was cold, but in that moment, warmth found its way back to their hearts. The rooftop garden was peaceful, filled with soft lights and the scent of blooming jasmine. The city below glittered like a sea of stars, but all the triplets could focus on was Ethan's quiet voice. He stood close to them, hands in his pockets, the wind brushing gently through his hair. "I know what it's like to be judged unfairly," he said. "People once thought I inherited everything I have, but they never saw the nights I worked until dawn just to keep from falling apart." His voice carried a hint of pain, one the triplets hadn't heard before. Lila stepped forward and said softly, "You don't have to defend us, sir. We'll prove ourselves." Ethan looked at her, then smiled faintly. "It's not about proving anything," he replied. "It's about remembering your worth when the world forgets it." The triplets exchanged glances, their eyes shining with quiet emotion. They had been called worthless, mocked, and shamed, but now someone powerful was telling them they mattered. That kind of kindness left a mark no amount of cruelty could erase. They sat for a while, talking under the open sky. Lana asked Ethan why he chose to help them out of everyone he could have. He paused, looking out at the skyline. "Maybe because you reminded me of someone who once saved me," he said softly. They didn't press further, sensing the weight
When they
behind his
finally
words.
returned to their rooms that night, the sisters felt something new, hope mixed with fear. They were finally finding happiness, but life had taught them that peace never lasted long. Down in the streets below, someone snapped a photo of them leaving the rooftop with Ethan. That single photo, harmless at first, would soon become the spark that turned their new life upside down. By morning, the photo had spread across the internet like wildfire. It showed Ethan Brooks, the famously private billionaire, standing on a rooftop at night with 3 identical young women. The caption read, "Who are the mysterious triplets close to Ethan Brooks?" Blogs, gossip sites, and social media exploded with rumors. Some called them his secret assistants. Others, more cruelly, called them his lovers. The comment section was filled with judgment and envy, twisting what had been an innocent moment into a storm of lies. When Lila saw the post on her phone, her hands went cold. Lisa gasped, covering her mouth while Lana quietly whispered, "This will ruin everything." They rushed to Grace's office, but she had already seen it too. Her eyes were filled with concern. "I've spoken to Mr. Brooks," she said. "He's aware, and he'll handle it." But the triplets could see the worry on her face. They had fought so hard to build a little peace, and now it was slipping away. Ethan arrived at the foundation later that morning, surrounded by reporters waiting outside the gate. He ignored the flashing cameras, walking straight in with his usual calm. When he entered his office, the triplets stood waiting, trembling. He looked at them and said softly, "I don't care what the world thinks. What matters is the truth, and I know it." Still, he knew the damage was done. Investors had begun calling, questioning his professionalism. That night, the triplets sat together in silence. The city lights outside their window no longer looked beautiful. They looked harsh and accusing. They didn't know it yet, but this scandal would test their bond, their dignity, and Ethan's heart in ways none of them could imagine. The next few days felt like walking through a storm. News outlets replayed the rooftop photo endlessly, twisting every detail into gossip. The foundation's phone lines buzzed non-stop, some calls from reporters pretending to donate, others from investors demanding answers. Ethan faced it with his usual calm, but Grace could see how tired his eyes had become. Still, his first concern was the triplets. He called them into his office one morning, his tone steady but heavy. "This noise will fade," he said, "but until then you'll stay low. No interviews, no public events. Just focus on your work."
The triplets nodded quietly, grateful but shaken. Leela's hands trembled as she spoke. "We didn't mean to cause trouble." Ethan's eyes softened. "You didn't," he said. "People just can't stand to see goodness without suspicion." Lisa fought back tears, feeling guilty even though she'd done nothing wrong. Lana, always the calmest, whispered, "We'll endure it. We've endured worse." Ethan smiled faintly at her strength, but he knew the world's cruelty could be sharper than anything they'd faced before. Later that evening, Leela checked her phone and found messages from an unknown number, cruel, mocking texts from people who had seen the news. She turned off her phone and cried quietly. Her sisters tried to comfort her, but the pain was deep. For the first time, Lisa questioned whether they should stay. "What if we're ruining his life?" she asked. Downstairs, Ethan stood alone by the building's glass wall, staring at the city lights. The scandal didn't scare him, but the thought of losing the 3 women who had brought light back into his life did. He knew then that this wasn't just a storm to outlast. It was a battle for something far more personal than reputation. The next morning brought a blow none of them saw coming. A rival company, eager to tarnish Ethan's name, released a fake story claiming the triplets had been offered special privileges in exchange for personal favors. The news spread fast, hitting every major blog and social media page. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was character assassination. The triplets' photos were everywhere, cropped and captioned with cruel words. Their past, their poverty, even their immigration status were dragged into public discussion. At the foundation, whispers filled every hallway. Some employees avoided them, others stared openly. When Leela entered the office that morning, she could barely meet anyone's eyes. Lisa tried to stay strong, but her voice shook as she answered calls. Lana sat quietly, trying to hold back tears, pretending to focus on her work. When Ethan arrived, he could feel the tension the moment he stepped out of the elevator. Grace handed him a folder filled with printed headlines. Her voice was low. "They're destroying their names, and yours too." Ethan flipped through the pages silently, his jaw tightening. That night, as rain poured over the city, the triplets sat together in silence. They had escaped humiliation once before, but this time the world itself had turned against them. Leela whispered through her tears, "Maybe we were never meant to have peace." And none of them could find an answer. The storm didn't stop. The media attacks grew sharper, and the foundation began losing donors. Ethan's board members started calling emergency meetings, demanding he distance himself from the triplets to save the company's image. Grace argued in their defense, but the pressure was mounting. Ethan refused to betray them, yet he could feel the walls closing in. The people who once praised his kindness now called him reckless. The triplets watched from a distance, feeling helpless as their presence began tearing apart the man who had saved them. That night, the sisters sat on the balcony of their suite, wrapped in blankets, watching the city lights blur through their tears. Lisa broke the silence first. "We can't stay," she whispered. Leela shook her head immediately, saying, "He believed in us. We can't just run away." But Lana, the quietest, spoke softly. "Sometimes love is letting go before you destroy what's good." Her words lingered painfully in the air. By morning, they had made their decision. They packed their bags, leaving behind a short letter on Ethan's desk. It read, "You gave us dignity when the world took it away. We'll never forget you, but we can't let your kindness be the reason your empire falls. Thank you for giving us a new start. Leela, Lisa, and Lana." When Ethan entered his office later that day and found the letter, he froze. His heart sank as he read the words, his hand trembling slightly. He had faced loss before, but this one cut deeper. Without saying a word, he grabbed his coat and left the building. Grace called after him, but he didn't stop. He had no destination, only one thought echoing in his mind. He wasn't going to lose them, too. Ethan drove for hours that night, his thoughts racing faster than the rain that blurred the windshield. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't let them vanish like Clara had. He checked every place he thought they might go, the cafe where they once worked, the bus station, even a few cheap motels near the city's edge, but they were nowhere to be found. Every time he asked at a counter or showed their photo, he was met with the same answer: "Sorry, never seen them." The night grew colder, but Ethan refused to stop. Meanwhile, the triplets had taken a bus to a small town 2 hours away, a quiet place with more trees than buildings. They rented a tiny room with the little savings they had and tried to start over. Lisa found part-time work at a diner, Leela helped in a small clinic, and Lana volunteered at a community center. They didn't speak much about Ethan, but every night they prayed he was doing well. Still, their hearts carried a silent ache, an emptiness that no new beginning could fill. Back in the city, Grace found Ethan sitting in his car outside the foundation early the next morning, exhausted and pale. She placed a cup of coffee on his dashboard and said softly, "You can't save everyone, sir." He stared ahead, his voice almost breaking. "I'm not trying to save them, I just need to know they're safe." He didn't know that at that very moment, the triplets were looking at the sunrise in that quiet town, whispering the same thing, hoping Ethan would somehow be safe too. Their paths had split, but fate had not finished weaving their story together. Not yet. 2 weeks passed in silence. The media storm began to fade, replaced by newer scandals, and Ethan's world slowly returned to normal on the outside. But inside, nothing felt the same. His mornings were colder, his office emptier, and his rooftop garden quieter. Grace noticed how he now stayed longer at work, as if avoiding the emptiness of his own home. One evening, as she brought him a file, she said softly, "You can rebuild your company, but not your peace. Maybe finding them isn't about business anymore." Ethan didn't respond, but her words stayed with him long after she left.
Meanwhile, in the small town of Maplewood, the triplets had begun to blend in with the community. The locals adored them. Lila's kindness at the clinic, Lisa's warmth at the diner, and Lana's patience with the children at the center. Still, every night they sat by the window of their shared room, wondering if Ethan ever thought about them. Then one morning, as Lila opened the mailbox outside the house they rented, she found a letter addressed to the Brooks sisters. Her heart stopped when she saw the handwriting. It was Ethan's. The letter was brief but powerful. "I don't care about reputation or wealth. What matters is the peace we lost the day you walked away. I just want you to come home, not for me, but for yourselves. The world doesn't get to define your worth. You do." Lila's eyes filled with tears as she read it aloud. Lisa covered her mouth and Lana simply whispered, "He found us." For the first time since leaving the city, hope would turn to the small room. But along with it came fear. Fear of what awaited them if they went back. The decision wasn't easy. The sisters stayed up all night debating whether to go back. Leela believed they owed Ethan a proper goodbye. Lisa was torn between gratitude and fear of being humiliated again. Lana, calm as always, finally said, "Maybe running isn't strength anymore. Maybe going back is." Her words settled the argument. The next morning, they packed their few belongings, folded Ethan's letter carefully into Leela's bag, and boarded a bus heading back to the city they once fled from. When they arrived at the Brooks Foundation, the front desk workers stared in shock. Word spread quickly. The triplets were back. Grace rushed to greet them, tears welling in her eyes. "I knew you'd come," she whispered as she hugged them one by one. She led them up to Ethan's office, where he stood by the window as usual. When he turned and saw them, he didn't speak right away. His expression softened into disbelief, then quiet relief. Leela stepped forward first. "We read your letter," she said. "You shouldn't have looked for us." Ethan shook his head gently. "I wasn't looking for employees. I was looking for family." His words broke the silence, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Lisa began to cry softly, and Lana smiled through her tears. Ethan told them he had created a new branch of the foundation, a program that would help young immigrant women start small businesses. "I want you three to lead it," he said. "You've lived that struggle. You know what it means to rise again." The sisters exchanged emotional glances. They had left the city broken, but returned as something stronger. Proof that dignity and kindness could outlast even the cruelest storms. The triplets accepted Ethan's offer with trembling voices and grateful hearts. That same week, they began working on the new project, an empowerment program called Rise Again. The name was Lana's idea, inspired by the journey they had walked through together. Each sister took a role. Lila handled coordination, Lisa managed design and branding, and Lana oversaw mentorship. For the first time in their lives, they were building something of their own, something that could heal others as it had healed them. Ethan watched them from a distance, quietly proud. He had never seen such dedication. They worked late into the nights, laughing softly as they argued about color palettes and training schedules. Sometimes he would walk into their office and find them asleep at their desks, their heads resting side by side like when they were children. Those small moments reminded him of what humanity truly meant: compassion, perseverance, and shared strength.
Months passed. The foundation began attracting global attention. Donors wanted to support Rise Again. Journalists requested interviews, and other organizations asked for partnerships. Yet through all the success, the triplets never forgot the day they were humiliated. They used that pain to drive their purpose. In one interview, Lisa said softly, "We were once broken by someone who thought power meant cruelty. Now we're proving that power can also mean kindness." Her words went viral across social media, and people began seeing them as symbols of hope. Ethan's smile grew wider each day. He knew he hadn't just changed their lives, they had changed his too. And in quiet moments, he would whisper to himself, "They didn't just rise again, they lifted me with them." One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning sessions, Ethan called the triplets into his office. His tone was softer than usual, his eyes a little weary. "There's something I've never told you," he said quietly. The sisters exchanged puzzled looks before sitting down. Ethan took a deep breath, then continued, "Years ago, I had a younger sister. She was bright, funny, and gentle like you three. But when I was building my company, I ignored her calls. She worked for a cruel manager who broke her spirit, and by the time I realized it, it was too late." His voice trembled. "She took her own life before I could help her. Since that day, I promised myself I'd never turn away from anyone being mistreated. When I saw what that man did to you in the restaurant, I saw my sister all over again. That's why I had to act." The room fell silent. Lila's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "You helped us because you wanted to save her through us." Ethan nodded slowly. "I thought I was rescuing you,
But the truth is, you rescued me." Lisa reached across the table and touched his hand. "Thank you for giving us a reason to believe again," she said softly. Lana added, "Maybe your sister is proud of you now." Ethan smiled faintly, tears finally breaking free. That night, after the sisters left his office, he sat alone by the window, staring out at the city lights. For the first time in years, he didn't feel haunted. He felt whole. The pain he once carried had become the foundation of something good, something pure. A year later, Rise Again became one of the most successful nonprofit programs in North America. The triplets stood on a bright stage in New York City as they received the National Humanitarian Award, presented by Ethan himself. The hall was filled with applause, flashing lights, and teary faces. Lila looked out at the crowd and whispered, "We did it." Lisa squeezed her hand tightly, while Lana smiled proudly at Ethan standing nearby. When it was their turn to speak, Lila stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "A year ago, we were just 3 girls who had lost everything," she began. "We were humiliated, ignored, and treated like we didn't matter. But one person chose to see us, not for what we had, but for who we were." Her eyes turned toward Ethan. His kindness reminded us that humanity still exists, even in a cold world.
Lisa took the microphone next. "No matter where you are or what you've lost," she said softly, "don't let shame define you. Let your scars become your strength." And Lana added the final words. "If life has ever knocked you down, promise me one thing: rise again." The hall erupted in applause. Ethan stood, clapping through tears. The lights above shimmered as if blessing the moment. The triplets hugged each other tightly, knowing that the pain that once destroyed them had now become their greatest power. Outside, as they walked into the cool night air, Ethan smiled and said, "You 3 have changed the world." Leela looked up at him and replied, "No, you taught us how." Their laughter echoed into the night, pure and free, proof that healing was possible and hope was real. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll away. Hit subscribe, share this video, and comment "Rise Again" below. Let's keep spreading stories of hope, kindness, and second chances.